Hey friends, it's Tomer, and today is previews for all 4 of the Commander Precons coming with Outlaws of Thunder Junction. So I'm going to be doing a video for every single Precon, starting with this one, Desert Bloom. This is a Naya deck focused on deserts. I'm going to look at the entire deck, starting with the 10 brand new cards that are exclusive to this deck, and then looking at all the reprints coming with it as well. But before we begin, you can always support the channel by purchasing these sweet new Precons over at our sponsor, cardgame.com/mtggoldfish. Alright, so Desert Bloom is a Naya Deserts deck. It's a lands deck that focuses on the desert land type. The entire goal of this deck is basically to play a bunch of desert lands, sacrifice them or mill them, put them into the graveyard, and then run a bunch of cards that reward you for doing so. So there's going to be a lot of landfall triggers, a lot of things that trigger and give you benefit when you're sacrificing them, a lot of ways of getting your deserts from the graveyard directly back onto the battlefield. So it's all about playing deserts, sacrificing deserts, milling deserts, and then getting a ton of value out of doing so. And our face commander, Yuma, Proud Protector, kind of showcases exactly what the deck wants to be doing. This is an 8-mana Naya 6/6 legendary creature human ranger that costs 1 less to cast for each land card in your graveyard, so it can cost as little as 3 mana just to cast. And whenever Yuma enters the battlefield or attacks, you may sacrifice a land. If you do, draw a card. And whenever a desert card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, you create a 4/2 green plant warrior creature token with reach. So Yuma tells you exactly what this deck wants to be doing. You want to be playing a bunch of deserts, sacrificing them, milling them, and then Yuma rewards you by letting you cast a 6/6 for as little as 3 mana, generating a bunch of 4/2 plant warrior creature tokens, which is very, very big, and they even come with reach, which is awesome, and then also draws you cards too as you're sacrificing lands. The card is very, very good and very similar to other sort of Lance Matter commanders. I'm thinking Titania, I'm thinking both Gitrog monsters, the Thalia kind and the original kind. We've seen this effect many times before, and I already know from a lot of experience that these type of triggers are incredibly powerful. So Yuma is exceptionally good and a very good reason to go heavy on deserts. The secondary commander that's new to the deck at least is Kiri, Talented Sprout. This is a 4-mana Naya 0/3 legendary creature plant druid. It says other plants and treefolk you control get +2/+0, and at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, return target plant, treefolk, or land card from your graveyard to your hand. So this is a nice little payoff, a little anthem for plants, treefolk, and also generates recursion if you have lands in the graveyard or any of those types. I think the power floor of Kiri is kind of similar to Yuma, where you're getting pretty decent value without having to work too hard for it, but the power ceiling is much lower because Yuma can generate like an obscene amount of tokens on a single turn, like infinite. You could do infinite combos with it quite easily, whereas Kiri is always going to give you pretty good value. Obviously, the more plants and tree folks you have, the more value you're going to be getting out of its Anthem effect, which is very notable, but it's definitely not as strong as Yuma. It's much cuter, though. Like, look at the art. It's adorable, and it's also pumping up tree folk, too, which is kind of notable. If you're in, like, a Naya tree folk deck, which I can't think of any Treefolk commander in Naya, but there could be. This is a pretty nice anthem. It can get back tree folks, and it pumps up your tree folks. So if there ever is a Naya-themed treefolk deck, I think this is going to be a fantastic addition in the 99, or maybe even as a leader of a Naya treefolk deck. I'm not even sure if there are any red treefolk. Let me know in the comment section, but it is very cute. I like it. Next, we've got Sand Scout, and move over Knight of the White Orchid because Sand Scout is ridiculous. This is a 2-mana white 2/2 creature human scout. When it enters a battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for a desert card, put it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle, and whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, create a 1/1 red, green, and white sand warrior creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. So this is a Knight of the White Orchid / Loyal Warhound effect, but it can only fetch up desert. It can't get plains, it only gets deserts, but I think that's actually an improvement if you have at least like 1 or 2 deserts in your deck. And then on top of that, whenever you're cracking your fetch lands or doing anything, like milling even, self-milling even, you're creating a bunch of creature tokens as extra value on top, which is absolutely absurd. So There aren't a lot of deserts out there that your average deck would want, but now with Thunder Junction, we have a couple really good ones, actually. So you could actually get some mana fixing if you got abraded bluffs. You could just get dual lands out of them. I mean, they don't have dual basic land types, but they tap for 2 different colors. Aired Archway is by far the best one to grab if you have other catch-up ramp mechanics in your deck, because it doesn't put you up a land, because it's a bounce land. So it returns something as it enters the battlefield. It returns another land. So it doesn't make your other catch-up ramp cards worse, like Knight of the White Orchid, or if you're like blinking Sand Scout, for example, too. Aired Archway is the best card to get first. And then there's other utility deserts you can be grabbing too, like Conduit of Pylons. So this card is fantastic. A lot of my decks that run Knight of the White Orchid and Loyal Warhound don't actually have any deserts, but now that Sand Scout is around, I'm much more likely to like throw in like 2 deserts, because why not, right? Like, this card is so strong. And we're not even talking about the tokens that it's making too, which makes the deck even better. All right, next up we have Dune Chanter. This is a 3-mana green, 2/3 creature plant druid. It has reach. Lands you control and land cards you own that aren't on the battlefield are deserts in addition to their other types. And lands you control have tap it, add 1 mana of any color, and you can tap it to mill 2 cards. You gain 1 life for each land milled this way. Now, Dune Chanter is a pretty cool card. It gives mana fixing to your lands. If you're in a lands deck, you generally like self-milling, and it does that for you as well too. It puts lands into your graveyard. That's all well and good. I think, though, this card is basically almost exclusively great in a desert deck. It's good in like any sort of land deck, but it's very good in a desert deck because we only have so many desert lands. Like, we have, you know, Amonkhet gave us a couple deserts, and Thunder Junction gave us even more deserts, but still, in your average mana base, it's not going to be all deserts. And Dune Chanter is fantastic because it turns all your non-desert lands into deserts for the sake of triggering Yuma and all your other Deserts Masters cards. So it's a really good playmaker in a desert deck. The other desert commander that you'd be looking at would be Hazazon, Shaper of Sand, and it works very well with Dune Chanter as well too, because suddenly, like, your fetch lands, for example, are now going to be considered deserts. So you can play them from your graveyard with Hazazon and then like sacrifice it for value, triggering the other Desert Matter cards like Yuma or other really cool Desert Matter cards too. So this card is going to be fantastic in a desert deck. I'm less hyped about it outside of desert decks. Next up, we've got Angel of Indemnity. This is a 6-mana white 5/5 creature angel warrior. It has flying, a lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, return target permanent card with mana value 4 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it has Encore of 8 mana. For those who don't know what Encore is, you pay the mana cost, and then you exile this from your graveyard. For each opponent, create a token copy that attacks that opponent this turn if able. They gain haste, sacrifice them at the beginning of next end step, activate only as a sorcery. So this is a really cool twist on Sun Titan. Sun Titan is a 6-drop, 6/6, and whenever it ETBs or attacks, you get to return a permanent card of mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this one can get 4 or less, so it can get more things. It's not an attack trigger, though. It has a better body, though. It's flying lifelink, so that's pretty darn sweet. It's a good blink target, but again, it doesn't have like an attack trigger on it as well. However, you trade out the attack trigger for the Encore ability, where if it's in the graveyard, you pay 8 mana, you get 1 copy of it per opponent. So in a 4-player 3-for-all game, that's 3 opponents. You're going to get 3 copies of it. You're going to return 3 things and smack people for 5 damage each and gain 15 life. Like, that's really good. This card is gas. It's not just good in like a self-mill deck, although it's going to be even better in a self-mill deck, but it's just good in general. It's also very, very good in Blink, for example. I'm particularly excited to put this in a Gyrid deck, for example. Both Gyrids are very keen on playing big token creatures, and they usually run lots of populate effects and stuff like that. If you populate the Encore token, it sticks around forever. The copy sticks around forever, so you just have a permanent Angel of Indemnity on the battlefield, which is very, very fun. And if you're also in a self-mill deck, like this one is a self-mill deck that focused mostly on lands, but if you're in like a dedicated self-mill deck, which is kind of rare to find in white, to be honest, like Amalia, for example, if you have ways of just milling a bunch of creatures into your graveyard very efficiently, then the Encore ability becomes even tastier. So yeah, this card is really, really strong. It's not flat out better than a Sun Titan or anything like that, but it has a lot of really powerful applications and is going to be more powerful than Sun Titan in specific decks, which is the perfect design of a new Magic card, I think. Next, we've got Rumbleweed. This is an 11 mana, 8/8 creature plant elemental, but it costs 1 less to cast for each land card in your graveyard. So if you have 10 lands in your graveyard, you can cast this for as little as 1 green mana, which is fantastic. It has Vigilance, Reach, and Trample, and whenever it enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain Trample until end of turn. So this is basically the Crater Hoof elemental for your self-mill lands decks. So it's really good here, obviously, because you're going to be milling and sacrificing lands, so you can quite easily, late game, cast this for 1 green mana, pump up your team, hopefully give this haste as well, too, so it can be attacking and benefiting from your lethal swing as well. But yeah, it's a great finisher for this deck, but not just this deck, other decks as well. Lord Windgrace, for example, is another lands deck that focuses heavily on your graveyard. You're also in red, so you have a lot more haste enablers available to you. And then outside of lands decks, you could run it in dedicated self-mill decks like Sidisi Brute Tyrant. It's not a lands deck in the general sense. However, you're going to be milling a lot of lands as you're casting Sidisi, attacking, and running other mill cards as well, too. So it could be a finisher in that one, too, because they're going to be making a bunch of zombie tokens that are going to be more than happy to get +3/+3 and trample until end of turn. So yeah, Rumbleweed, excellent finisher in a bunch of different decks. Next, we've got Cataclysmic Prospecting. This is a new red sorcery, X double red, and it says deal X damage to each creature. For each mana from a desert spent to cast a spell, create a tapped treasure token. So this is a board wipe exclusively for desert decks, really. It's not the most mana efficient board wipe. In red, we have Blasphemous Act, we even have like Chain Reaction if we just want to wipe the board as mana efficiently as possible. But the main thing here is that if you're in a desert deck, you get to generate a ton of treasure tokens when you're casting it, making it more than worth it to set up explosive next turns, for example. And even though it's not very mana efficient in terms of what red board wipes go for these days, you're in green. You're a desert deck, you're in green. You could generate a ton of mana. That's less of an issue for you. The fact that you get a whole bunch of treasure tokens in the process is the real payoff here, because it sets up your next turn to be like super game winning, essentially. Next, we have Embrace the Unknown. This is a 3-mana red sorcery. It says, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. And as Retrace, Retrace basically says you can cast it from your graveyard by paying the mana cost, which is 3 mana here, and discarding a land as an additional cost. So you can just repeatedly cast Embrace the Unknown from your graveyard over and over again, as long as you're discarding a land each time. Now, this is a great card advantage engine, not just in this deck, but obviously in any sort of Exile Matters deck as well. Prosper Tombbound, Faladorn, Rocco Street Chef, which constantly gets underrated, Rocco. Real powerhouse commander as well, too. Anything that cares about casting from Exile is going to absolutely love this card as well, too. And it's particularly great in this card, too, because if you're discarding lands to the Retrace ability, that triggers Yuma, you make another token as well, too. So this is just a great, great card. Next, we have another fantastic new addition to any lands deck. This is Vengeful Rebirth. It's a 6-mana green sorcery. It says return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Create that many 4/2 green plant warrior creature tokens with Reach. And it also has Flashback of 8 mana, so you can cast it from the graveyard for 8 mana. Yeah, this card is really, really strong, right? It's recursion. It's a lot of mana for the recursion, but it comes with up to 3 4/2 green tokens with Reach, which is just really good. So again, outside of just Yuma, this is a slam dunk in basically any lanes deck, because basically every single lanes deck is also a graveyard deck, because you're just like, you know, either self-milling yourself or you're sacrificing your fetch lands and everything. You'll always have lands in the graveyard, so it's very easy value. So Lord Windgrace, Titania, Hazazon, this is a slam dunk in all of those. And then the final new card is actually a land. It's Cactus Preserve. It's a desert. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. And you can pay 3 mana. Until end of turn, Cactus Preserve becomes an XX green plant creature with reach, where X is the greatest mana value among your commanders. It's still a land. So this is one of the best deserts ever printed for this deck. Surprise, surprise. It was designed for this precon. It's basically enters the battlefield tapped. It's a reflecting pool at the very least. So it's a tapped reflecting pool. It has that desert land type, which is oh so important. And then for 3 mana, if you have excess mana available, it becomes an 8/8 if our commander is Yuma. So it works perfectly with our commander. It really abuses the fact that Yuma has a very high mana value of 8, but you're realistically only casting it for 3 mana. So it really cheats on that. And yeah, just having an 8/8 when you need to start attacking and you don't care about, having extra mana available to you is really good. And it also has reach. So if your opponents try to attack you, you can always have a surprise blocker for them, which is just exceptional. So yeah, it's a great land. So those were all 10 of the brand new cards exclusive to Precon. And now we're going to check out the rest of the deck, which are the reprints. I'm always starting with the most expensive reprints before, the cards are actually available for purchase. So the deck has actually a lot of really good reprints in it. Value-wise, the most expensive one is Ancient Green Warden, which is an exceptionally strong deck in a lands deck. One of my favorite green cards of all time, Oracle Moldaya, is the next most expensive one. It's about $7. I love this card. And then there's a couple $5 cards. There's World Shaper and Scoot Swarm, and I think there's like 2 other cards that are in the $5 mark. And then there's a bunch of reprints that are like $3 to $2. So currently the value of the deck is about like $100. The prices are going to go down a lot, obviously, after the cards become available to everybody. But that's just something to note. Like the reprints value of the deck is actually quite good. So let's start with the rest of the reprints. We're starting with each card type. I'm starting with like creatures and then non-creatures and then finally lands. And I start from the lowest mana value and work my way up to the highest mana value. Genesis Hydra, I do not like. The deck makes a lot of mana, so it's not awful, but I just don't like this card. Satyr Wayfinder, fantastic in a self-milled lands deck like this one. Eccentric Farmer's pretty solid too. Elvish Rejuvenator is fine. It gets non-basics, which is the most important part. It's in a desert deck, so it's actually quite good in this deck, actually. Then we have Hazezon, Shaper of Sand, which is an alternate commander for the entire deck, actually. I think Yuma is actually stronger than Hazezon, because Yuma is basically a 3-mana commander as well, too. But it can also continually be cast as a 3-mana commander if you have enough lanes in your graveyard, because even the command dex gets reduced after its discount ability. And also its card draw and the tokens it produces are much bigger as well too. Hazezon's also very, very strong. It's a little bit different. But yeah, I just think Yuma's a little bit stronger. Then we have Ramming Up Excavator, $5 card. It's exceptionally good in this deck because it's just fantastic land recursion. Skullwinder, I love this card. Springbloom Druid sacrifices a land. It works exceptionally well in this deck, and it's a very solid ramp. We got Turntimber Sower, again, works very, very well with the graveyard theme of the deck. Nantuko Cultivator, a great way to get lands into your graveyard and trigger all your graveyard/mill matters cards. Scary Tiller, a great way to ramp either from your hand or from your graveyard. World Shaper, another staple. Mass land recursion is fantastic. Nestling Dragon, it's all right. Perennial Behemoth, again, it's like a Ramming Up Excavator. It works great. Titania doubles up on all the tokens we're going to be making with Yuma and now this one. Sun Titan, another great reprint. It can also get lands directly from the graveyard back onto the battlefield. Angel of the Ruins, cycle it early, play it later. It's always great. Avenger of Zendikar, one of the best land payoffs in the entire game. It's an amazing reprint here as well too. Omnath, another one of the best payoffs for lands decks too. Wins the game very, very quickly. And even if your opponents have a board wipe, It's usually too late for them. Magmatic Insight is pretty good too. Path to Exile, it's a staple. Requisition Raid is from the main set, and it's just very flexible and very good. I like it a lot. Unholy Heat is alright. Bovine Intervention is very good. Explore, very good. Thrilling Discovery, discard your lands, draw more cards. Valorous Stance, flexible removal and protection. What's not to like? Winding Way works really great here too. Electric Revelation, I'm like about. Harrow is fantastic here. Heaven Earth is pretty good. Seven's Reclamation, just very good. Rekka Rebuild, love to see it here. It just does both things the deck really wants to be doing. Decimate, oldie but a goodie. Map the Frontier, fantastic in this deck because it's an explosive vegetation that can get deserts, which is just fantastic. Escape to the Wilds, amazing ramp and also card advantage. Our Promise also can get deserts, which is fantastic. Return of the Wild Speaker, staple card draw. Descend Upon the Sinful, been a while that I've seen this card. It's not the best board wipe, but it is fine. Then we have Artifacts, Soul Ring, the staple, Arcane Signet, the staple. By the way, these are not going to be the same artworks or expansions, obviously, as what you'll be finding in the Precon. The reprints, we're just showing just any type of version of it being generated. So just a heads up there. Perpetual Timepiece, very nice protection in a graveyard deck. Swiftfoot Boots, protection for your commander. Chromatic Lantern is fine. I don't think it's very good in this deck, actually. Bitter Reunion, nice. Crawling Sensation, nice. Marshal's Anthem, it's all right. The Mending of Dominaria, milling, and then Mass Recursion is really good. And then we have all the lands, and the lands are actually very important. Usually I just skip the lands because I'm like, oh, they're fine. But in a desert deck where the main focus of the deck is actually deserts, it's important to see how many deserts we have. And they printed basically all of them that aren't expensive. So it's actually quite good. The land base is actually quite good because of that. So we have Abraded Bluffs, Bristling Backwoods, Command Tower, Conduit Pylons, Creosote Heath, Desert of the Fervent, Desert of the Indomitable, Desert of the True, Dunes of the Dead, Evolving Wilds, Hashep Oasis, Jungle Shrine, Crows and Verge, Mirage Mesa, Painted Bluffs, Ramming Up Ruins, Scattered Groves, Scavenger Grounds, Sheffet Dunes, Sheltered Thicket, and then the final two, Sunscorched Divide and Terramorphic Expanse. So while the lands aren't very expensive, and if this was outside of a desert deck, I would say it's kind of bad, but in a deck that is all about deserts, well, the land base actually has a lot of deserts, so they did a very good job on that. All right, and that is the full deck list. So overall thoughts of the deck is it's very, very strong. Lands has always had a lot of support and a very deep card pool to work with in Magic the Gathering. So it's very easy to assemble a very strong Lands Matters deck in a Precon, even on a low budget or whatever. And they also went very ham on deserts, the deserts mattering. They reprinted basically all the deserts that you could ask for as well too. And the new cards are very, very sweet as well too. So I think right out of the box, this is going to be one of the stronger Precons. And if you really like deserts, if you like Naya Lands Mattering, if you like Self-Mill, this is going to be a really nice Precon for you. All right, so that's one Precon down, 3 more to go. So check back on the channel, like and subscribe if you like this sort of content. I'll be back with the next 3 Precons coming very soon. So until next time, friends, see ya.